And the fact that it's found in the water, downriver, yeah, it's just strange. It's strange. So we're organizing a search for Jack and Lilly Sullivan. We are relying on community members to come and join those efforts.
Just now, the RCMP has finally confirmed two painfully obvious clues that many people in this investigation suspected for months, but were never officially acknowledged until today. These new confirmations do not solve the case, but they change the direction of it. And the hardest part? They point straight towards something investigators should have been focusing on all along. Stay with me. This is the clearest shift we've seen in this case since spring. Before we break down the two new confirmations, here's the quick background. The part of the story that still feels unreal to anyone who has followed this case from the beginning. Lilly and Jack Sullivan vanished on May 2nd, 2025, in the quiet, rural stretches of Pictou County, Nova Scotia. One moment they were accounted for. The next their trail dissolved into a maze of conflicting timelines, incomplete statements, and unanswered questions. What made it even more unsettling was how quickly the situation escalated from a simple search to one of the most intense and resource-heavy investigations the province has seen in years. Within hours, search teams expanded from local responders to a massive joint effort. Hundreds of officers were deployed. Specialized drones swept fields, forests, and waterways. Volunteer groups combed through dense brush and steep terrain that normally goes untouched. K-9 units were brought in early, followed by additional tracking dogs, and later, cadaver dog teams were introduced as the search stretched into its later stages. Despite all of this, despite the sheer volume of ground covered, none of these efforts produced the breakthrough everyone hoped for. Then there were the belongings. Scattered items found by both volunteers and investigators sparked waves of speculation. Some objects were immediately sent for forensic testing. Others were ruled out. Tips poured in, more than 860 in total, each one logged, sorted, and evaluated. But through it all, the RCMP maintained a firm silence. Weeks turned into months with no major public updates, no confirmed direction, and no explanation for why so many leads seemed to hit the same dead end. And that's exactly why today matters. Because today, after months of near-total quiet, the RCMP finally revealed two new pieces of information. Two confirmations that don't just add details to the case, but actually reshape the way people understand what might have happened to Lilly and Jack. RCMP confirms the silence surrounding Lilly and Jack's disappearance has stretched so far, for so long, that it no longer fits into any category of quick tragedy, brief accident, or simple misunderstanding. And when investigators finally acknowledged this, it landed like a punch, not because it was surprising, but because it confirmed what so many people already felt deep down. For the first time, investigators publicly admitted something families, volunteer searchers, and thousands of people following the case have been whispering among themselves for months. There is no single, simple explanation for why two young children could vanish without leaving behind even one consistent, reliable trace. No clear trail, no confirmed direction, no verified last sighting that the RCMP was willing to stand behind. Nothing that points to an obvious narrative. This confirmation may sound small, but in reality, it shifts the emotional weight of the entire investigation. It acknowledges a truth the community has quietly struggled with since day one, that what happened to Lilly and Jack is not the type of situation that resolves itself within a few days. It's not the kind of disappearance where answers fall into place through routine searches, quick interviews, or a straightforward timeline. The RCMP's statement validates what people have been sensing instinctively, that the case is more complicated, more layered, and possibly more intentional than any early theory ever suggested. For many who have followed every update, every search effort, every unconfirmed rumor, this acknowledgement is both heartbreaking and clarifying. Heartbreaking because it confirms the depth of the unknown. Clarifying because it finally aligns the official narrative with the reality everyone has been observing, that something about this case has been off from the very beginning. And now, the RCMP is finally saying out loud, RCMP confirms, none of the items collected in the early days of search, not the clothing, not the small belongings, and not even the widely discussed pink blanket, show any forensic evidence that would place Lilly or Jack in danger at the exact locations where those objects were discovered. And that single confirmation immediately rewrites a huge portion of the theories surrounding this case. For months, people clung to those items as if they were puzzle pieces that would eventually snap into place. The pink blanket especially became a symbol, a detail that many believed held the emotional truth of what happened. Volunteers talked about it. Online groups dissected it. Entire conversations spiraled around whether it meant the children had been injured or whether something terrible had unfolded nearby. But today, RCMP confirmed what almost no one expected to hear. Forensics did examine the blanket, and it revealed no signs of injury, no biological markers, no indication of struggle, and no proof that the children were harmed anywhere near that area. Nothing about it tied them to a traumatic event at that site. And that is what makes this confirmation so painfully obvious. Not because it's simple, but because it forces everyone to reconsider assumptions that felt emotionally true, but were never backed by physical evidence. Investigators have now made it clear. Those items do not reflect a moment of crisis. So what does that mean? It opens a very different and much more unsettling possibility. The items might not represent what actually happened, but rather what someone wanted investigators and the community to believe happened, which means the belongings could have been moved, placed, or left intentionally in those locations, not as clues, but as distractions. This doesn't just remove a theory. It removes an entire foundation people thought they were standing on. Putting these two confirmations together reveals something big, something that many people sense but were hesitant to say out loud. First, there is no evidence the children wandered off on their own. Second, there is no evidence that the items found, including the clothing and the pink blanket, reflect what actually happened to them. When you place those statements side by side, the picture shifts dramatically. Instead of pointing toward a simple explanation, the investigation now leans away from any version of events involving a quick accident or momentary lapse in supervision. The RCMP is essentially saying that nothing in the environment around the home explains the children's disappearance. Nothing found so far ties the children to a tragic event in those wooded areas, fields, or riverbanks. And nothing about the recovered objects suggests that the locations where they were discovered were ever significant to the real timeline. This moves the investigation into a completely different lane, one where the immediate surroundings of the children's home may not represent their final movements at all. The geography that everyone has been focused on for months, the trails, the ditches, the river, the yard, might have very little to do with the truth. And that shift opens doors investigators were extremely cautious about discussing publicly early on. It raises a possibility that the disappearance did not happen where everyone assumed. It introduces the idea that the items may have been intentionally placed to mimic a scenario that never occurred. It suggests a potential for relocation, for misdirection, or for involvement by someone who understood the area well enough to create a misleading story through object alone. None of this confirms who, why, or how, but it does confirm that the situation is not random, not accidental, and not disconnected. It points to intention. It points to planning. And for the first time, the investigation is now aligned with that possibility. The RCMP says the case remains active, and that single sentence carries more weight now than it did months ago. It means investigators are not slowing down, not stepping back, and not treating this disappearance as a cold case. Instead, they're moving forward with new clarity, new direction, and new understanding of what the evidence doesn't show. That alone changes the urgency behind every step they take next. Volunteer teams are still out there too. These aren't casual searches. These are organized, coordinated efforts by people who refuse to let the trail fade, even when official updates were rare. Every week, searchers revisit areas, widen search grids, analyze terrain, and document anything that stands out. Their persistence has kept attention alive, kept community pressure steady, and kept the possibility of new discoveries open. Digital forensics remain a major part of the investigation. This includes data pulled from phones, devices, cameras, vehicle routes, online interactions, and any digital footprint that could fill the gaps in the timeline. It's slow work, often invisible to the public, but it's the kind of analysis that can completely reshape an investigation when even one overlooked detail surfaces. And now that investigators have finally confirmed these two major but long unspoken clues, the expectation is shifting. People are waiting for more. The public is paying closer attention. And the RCMP knows that releasing these confirmations means more updates are possible, even likely in the near future. Because if the children didn't walk away on their own, and if the scene around the home didn't reflect the real story, then everything changes. The real timeline may begin somewhere else. The real location may be far from the assumed search zone, and the real explanation may be nothing like the early theories that dominated the first days. Whatever comes next, I'll keep updating this case the second new information drops.